again. The earlier techniques presented for testing grammar have zeroed in on considering grammar as knowledge of the language rules. Thus, they require the students to recognize or produce the correct forms of the language. The goal of language instruction is accuracy in language usage. This time, we should like to focus on another grammar test which follows the communicative view of language as a tool for communication. The language structures are there to help in creating and transacting meaning in a communication process. To achieve this communicative view of grammar in testing, there are several considerations to be made in the preparation of a task-based test. We say that these are the factors that contribute to the communicative nature of a grammar test. But before we directly enumerate these factors, let us go back to the example presented earlier. Let me try to read the situation again. You are the news editor of your school paper. One of the students has sent you a news article for publication, and the article is not well written. See the news article below. Let's try to see the features of this communicative test. Notice that there is a given situation which provides the contextualization of the test task. It tells the situation in which a communicative task needs to be carried out. It provides the text that needs to be processed. In this case, the text is a news article. The first factor or requirement then is a realistic situation or a context. The second factor is task. This is the instruction for the students to perform a communicative task. This identifies the purpose for the test activity. In this example, the test is to rewrite the news article so it will be well written for publication. In addition to these two basic requirements, notice that the audience to whom the communication is addressed is implied. The news article is for the school paper, and the students are its target audience. What then does it entail to measure grammar communicatively? First, the contextualization of the test items. Isolated sentences have no place in communicative testing of grammar. Second, there must be a communicative purpose. Third, the instructions to the students should be to focus on meaning rather than on form. And lastly, the test takers have an opportunity to create their message. Production of a well-formed text is the bottom line of this task. Let's construct another task-based test of grammar. Here's the situation. You have invited Carmela to your town fiesta. You like to send her a message on how to get to your place because she hasn't been there. What communicative task will you most likely ask your students to do? The situation suggests a communicative need, that is, how to let Carmela know how to reach your house. This is the context. Now, what logical tasks will you assign your students to perform to meet the communicative need? Of course, to send Carmela a message or a set of instructions or directions on how she can come to your place. This is the tasks. Write a short note to Carmela, giving her clear directions on how to get to your place for the fiesta. In this test, it is implied that the audience is a friend or a classmate. The task calls for a language function, that is, to give directions. and the expected output is a written message. Let's try something that will be more interesting to students both at the elementary and secondary levels. We know very well how comic strips appeal to young readers. We can utilize this by using them for instruction and testing purposes. How do we go about this? First, select a comic strip that has 2 characters in it. The daily newspapers carry this kind of material. Here are some examples. Notice that there are only 2 characters in the frames. The facial expressions also suggest what is happening and what the characters are talking about. After a comic strip has been selected, remove the lines or erase the lines inside the bubbles. Either you erase only the lines of one character or you erase the lines of both characters. The bubbles will appear blank. See how they will look now. This one has only the lines of one character erased. This means the lines of the other character still provide additional context clues. Let's look at the second type. Here, all lines have been erased. It means the students are required to supply all the lines of the comic strip. The next step, of course, is for the students to supply the lines. As you can see, a comic strip as a visual aid in testing can be very useful. Between the 2 types, you have seen the second one allows for greater divergence in student output in terms of the language forms they may use, since no textual constraints are provided. The first type is more convergent, since they have to restore the original lines to fit the lines of the second character. Let's analyze this testing format again. What makes this communicative is the fact that it is highly contextualized. The visual format contributes obviously to what the context or the situation is. There is also a communicative task of restoring the missing lines of the speaker. To add an additional communicative flavor, this task can be for a writing contest with a winning entry being published in the school paper. This provides the purpose for writing the text. And for the last requirement of the course, the students will create or produce a text at the discourse level. It will make them use acceptable language forms to create meaning. As you can see, this is quite similar to a communicative test of writing. How this may differ is in how you will evaluate the output, or in this case, the written message. Since this is a test of communicative grammar, quality of communication or comprehensibility of the message is very important here. Quality is gauged through the clarity of the message, through the use of well-formed sentences to convey the intended meaning. It is assumed that greater comprehensibility is attained if the sentences are appropriately or accurately written. It calls for appropriacy and accuracy of form. For language teachers, scoring can be done through the use of some rating scales. Here's an example of one on quality of communication. Quality of communication scale. 6 points. All relevant information was conveyed. 5 points. Most relevant information was conveyed. 4 points. A fair amount of relevant information was conveyed. 3 points. Some relevant information conveyed. 2 points. Very little relevant information was conveyed. 1 point. Virtually no relevant information was conveyed. If you're interested in focusing on the accuracy of structures, You may do so only after you have evaluated the meaning of the message. Here's one scale you may use on grammaticality. 6 points, all statements are rendered correctly. 5 points, most statements are rendered correctly. Only minor problems with structures. 4 points, many correct statements, but with some problems with structures. 3 points, some statements rendered correctly, but many structural problems remain. 2 points, very few statements rendered correctly. And 1 point, no statements rendered correctly. You must have observed that the communicative approach to testing grammar has moved away from simply looking at grammar in terms of language forms per se to looking at grammar as central for effective and efficient communication. We'll review what we have learned today after this break. Stay tuned.